Hey friend, welcome back to Bible Tract Echoes. I'm Mike McCurry, your host. I want to thank you so much for joining me today and this week on the broadcast. Today, we're going to hear once again from a friend of mine. His name is Zach Carmen. He's a young man, assistant pastor in central or southern Indiana. He's doing a great work. He's been there for more than a few years now, and God's used him. But as he speaks to us, I want you to realize the background with which he speaks. Zach's been through a lot in recent days, and he's going to preach from a tender place. He's going to preach from a place full of what God has done for him despite the family struggles and health trials that he has navigated his family through. I'm going to ask you to lend him your ears. This message that you'll be hearing in just a moment that I'm introducing to you was preached at the 40th anniversary celebration, homecoming of my father-in-law's, happens to be my pastor, his 40th anniversary as the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Dwight. That's my home church. And I was there. I made sure I was in town. I travel a lot. I'm speaking out all the time as a representative of Bible Tracts Incorporated, and I'm asked to speak places as the director of BTI, but I made sure I was home for this one. And when I heard Zach speak and what he spoke about, what God led him to, and the way the grace with which he spoke, I thought this would be something that would be a help to the Bible Tract Echoes listening family. So I'm going to ask you to tune your ears to what God has for you today. I'm going to ask the question, are you going through trials? But let's listen to a young man that has been through some trials. And as we go further into this week, let's learn how to handle them. This message is by Zach Carmen, and it's titled, When It Rains, It Pours. Listen now.
Joseph has been through a lot. A young man who has been lied about. Brothers wanted to kill him, so instead of killing him, they sold him to slavery, sold to an Egyptian. The Egyptian's wife lied about him. The Egyptians threw him in prison, and now he is there, and he asked the butler to do one simple thing. When you stand before Pharaoh, remember me. And what ends up happening in chapter 40, verse 23, is he's forgotten. It said, yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. And so tonight, as I said, the title of the message is When It Rains, It Pours, and you're probably wondering, how does this apply to that? Well, oftentimes, say when we talk about when it rains, it pours, what we oftentimes think about is we think about how when there are trials in our lives, it just seems like trial after trial after trial after trial comes our way. And so in that sense, there's a couple of people in the Bible that I think about, and that would be Job and that would be Joseph. That trial after trial after trial just seems to come their way, and it seems to be never ending. It seems to be impossible to get out of. It seems that they're in a hole that will never end. But tonight there's a little bit of a different definition that I want to show you. The origin of when it rains, it pours. Anybody know where that saying came from? Say in 1914, it was used by Morton Salt as their slogan. And the slogan was, when it rains, it pours. Because the issue back then was salt began to start caking up and it wouldn't pour out. They were having an issue with it clumping together and it wasn't usable anymore. And so what they did is they put an anti-caking agent in it, and they were the first company to do it. And so their advertising was what you see on their bags now. You have a little girl with a little raincoat, an umbrella, and what she's carrying with her is a thing of salt that is pouring out behind her, showing that even in the rain, the salt pours. And so tonight, what I want to share with you is that sometimes when the rain is coming in our lives, we get so focused on the rain that we miss God's blessings pouring out on us. We get so focused on what is going on, and really that is natural. We are a very self-absorbed people, especially as Americans. That's just the way we are. But what we'll look at now here in the life of Joseph, we'll read some more, that there was a lot of blessings that came during those trials. It wasn't just all trials. And we'll look and we'll see in a lot of the trials that it says, but God was with Joseph over and over and over again. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just God was with Joseph. No, it required some faith on Joseph's part. It required him being faithful. It required him sticking by it when it got hard. And so tonight, as I said, I'm going to preach this message, and it can apply to a lot of different areas. It applied to my life. I preached this a few months ago in my church. And I told my pastor shortly after, or about a month ago, I told him, I said, Pastor, I'm a firm believer now that sometimes when you preach a message, it's for the preacher. I'm a firm believer that sometimes when a preacher prepares a message and God gives the preacher a message, that it's for the preacher himself. Say it's been a long couple months, been a hard couple months. Say a lot of you have been praying for my little boy Ezra, born in January this year, and a lot of things came with that. It was hard. We're in the hospital with him, and I remember, we see him, we got to hold him, which if you don't know about our first boy, say he had some breathing problems when he was born, and so we didn't get to hold him. I barely got to see him and touch him. My wife went back to the room, and they brought him back on the gurney as they were taking him to Evansville, and she didn't even get to see him or touch him. Hard time. She had to be in the hospital for another 3 or 4 days, and so it was a good 4 or 5 days before she even met our son. Hard time. And so I remember when Ezra was born, and they brought him to the room, and I got to see him, I got to hold him, the joy that filled my soul, and then they say, okay, we're going to come back, and we're going to do a quick checkup on him, and then we'll bring him right back in. Okay. Well, they come in, they do that checkup, and then they come back in the room, and they say, we found something, and we've called Riley Children's Hospital in Indianapolis. We're going to need to fly him there. And I remember my heart sinking. I remember just sitting there and thinking, Lord, why? I finally got to hold my little boy. And now, what's wrong? And after that, I remember, it seemed like everything up to that point was doing just fine. Everything was going smoothly. But then between all that, and we had some more doctor's appointments, and all of you have been praying for him, and I appreciate that. We had the surgery, was successful in that sense, and so we were rejoicing in that. And then I preached this message, and then shortly after, we had a doctor's appointment for him, and they said, well, it looks like things may not be working as well as we want them to, so we're going to set up some more doctor's appointments. And I remember, again, my heart just sinking, thinking, Lord, why? Not accusing God of anything, not saying, Lord, why am I going through this trial, but just, Lord, what do you have for me through this? What is the purpose? And thinking, what is going on? And then after that, my wife, she was still sick at the time, and we thought maybe it was just dealing with after pregnancy and all those things. And come to find out, we go to the doctor the first week, and there was an infection. And we're like, okay, so they gave her some antibiotics. We're good to go. She felt a little bit better. Then the next week was awful again. So went back to the doctor and said, well, it's more complex than we thought, so we're going to give you some different antibiotics. So they gave her some different ones. Then we thought that worked. The next week, same pain. Wondering what in the world is happening. And so come to find out, she had a kidney stone, a very large one. And so we went to the emergency room. We're trying to get to a different hospital. They call one hospital. They say the doctor's going on vacation tomorrow, so there's no way. Call another hospital. They said we don't have room for her. They called another hospital, and the doctor just straight up said, no, we're not taking her. And so then they sent us to Kentucky. No idea why Kentucky, but that's where we went. And so, funny story about that is I had no idea we were going to Kentucky. They said, you're going to Deaconess Hospital. I said, okay, I know where that's at. So I started taking off for Evansville. And because we had been there before, and I said, okay, absolutely, I'll meet you there. And so I get down to Evansville, and I stop at a gas station for a second. I get back to the car, and she had her phone with her, so I go to track her. And I go to track. When I went into the gas station, she was on the north side of Evansville. I said, perfect, I'll meet her right at the hospital. Well, I get back out to the car, and I grab my phone, and I look at it, and she's in Kentucky. And I said, to be honest, I sat there, and I thought, why in the world is she in Kentucky, out of all places? And so come to find out there's a hospital there. So we went there. And so we get there, and there was more issues. The hospital staff wasn't necessarily very professional. There was a lot of issues there. And then on top of that, they go in to have the surgery, and the doctor is apparently very good. A lot of people at the hospital talked about him, said he's a very good doctor, and they come out and they say, he comes out and talks to me, he says, well, I tried, but I couldn't get it, and it says that he put a stent in. I'm like, oh man, she's not gonna be happy about that. And so then we go back, I go back up to the room, I'm sitting there waiting for her, and they bring her in, and she's all happy and smiling, and I said, I kind of sat there with kind of a solemn look on my face, and they didn't tell you, did they? She said, tell me what? I said that you still have the stone, and she looked at me and said, are you kidding me? And so, but it just seemed at the time that with Ezra's physical conditions, his doctor's appointment, all these things with this kidney stone, and it's been almost 2 months now that we've known about it, and still nothing. And so it's been a long time. It's been a hard time, and I'm sure many of you have been through things that are harder than that. Many of you have been through things where it feels like, in the first sense that we talked about of when it rains, it pours, that it's just trial after trial after trial, and it seems like there is no way out. But as we look at Joseph's life, we'll see what point number 2 is. It's treasure through the trials.
What a blessing to hear this testimony of God's blessings on this dear young family. You say, what are you talking about? It sounds like this guy's been through the ringer. It sounds like his wife and his children have been through a lot. But think about the attitude he has. I've said it many times on this broadcast, but hurt people hurt people. But what a blessing it is to hear Zach Carmen speak to us, and speak to us in such a way that we know he's been walking with God. To hear about a young man that would weep on the altar and say, God, please make a change here, but I'll follow your will, whatever it may be. That's convicting. That gets you right where it hurts, doesn't it? It gets you right in the heart. But then you realize that's what God's asking for. He's asking for us to submit to him. I'm very good at telling God what I want him to do, but I'm not so good at listening to what he wants me to do. Maybe you're in that same boat. Maybe something that's already been said this week has been a blessing to you. Maybe it's something that's grabbed your attention. I would love to hear from you. You can text me at 309-316-7240. Again, the number is 309-316-7240. There are very few things that bring me more joy than hearing from people that tune into this radio broadcast, and so many of you do so consistently, and I'm thankful for that. It's been quite a while, maybe since we put a plea out to let me know, where are you listening from? What radio station are you listening on? Give me your name. I want to hear from you. If you've never done that before, I'm speaking to you. Text me. Let me give you that number one more time. It's 309-316-7240. Now remember, the announcer will come on with all the other ways you can connect with us in just a moment. Remember the radio program, Bible Tract Echoes. It is a subsidiary and a partner of Bible Tracts Incorporated, a ministry founded by Dr. Paul Levine back in 1938. We print gospel tracts, put them around the world free of charge, and we'd love to send some to you today. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Tomorrow, we're going to continue this message titled, When It Rains, It Pours, because I'm thankful for the fact that God knows where you are. And that's what Zach will talk about tomorrow. Have a great day for his glory. We'll talk to you soon. God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to Bible Tract Echoes, the radio ministry of Bible Tracts Incorporated. Want to see our gospel tracts and other resources? Visit us online at BibleTractsInc.org. That's BibleTractsInc.org. Or follow us on social media to learn how you can partner with this ministry. Thanks again for listening. May the Lord richly bless you as you live for Him.